Welcome to my first take on faith and spirituality in Uganda. As an intro, as of now, there are three major religious themes in Uganda. Among the Ugandan people, there's animistic tradition, there's Christianity, both Catholic and Anglican, and Muslim. Back in antiquity, when the explorers Livingstone and Stanley were entering the continent, the Kabaka, king of Buganda Kingdom, was converted to both Muslim faith and Christian faith. The Muslims came first, bringing gifts. The Kabaka accepted. Then came Charles Stanley, doing the same. The king also accepted and converted to the Christian faith. And it was attributed to Charles Stanley to have converted him. Charles Stanley, at best, was a Christian in name only. Little did I know, till I read the stories of Stanley, that the sort of Christianity I see in Uganda today has strong similarities to this most public conversion of the Kabaka. Muslims are often Muslim in name and ritual only. Christians are Christian for the nominal benefits of it. Uganda is filled with NGOs and Christians with money to support the poor. A very robust industry has been raised around the poverty of the poorest of the poor, where the poor get food and those in charge of distributing it, both in Uganda and Western people, they live upper middle class lifestyles. And some Western people are actually very, very wealthy and command a lot of power and influence in Uganda due to their material wealth, which they have gotten from the poverty of the poorest of the poor. Where it gets confusing is when these wealthy Christians also begin to preach Jesus. As a result, these wealthy Christians become surrounded by Ugandans who also spout out Christian sentiments because it gets them material benefits. They don't have to starve if they do this. Meanwhile, these Christians are in church on Sunday and participating in their animistic traditions every other day of the week. It is the story of the Kabaka's conversion over and over again. But then there are the other Christians in Uganda who say they are born again or spirit-filled. Many of these Christians are marked by their extreme sincerity. You'll find them here and there, sometimes rejecting, sidelining their animistic traditions. Some altogether reject the ancestral traditions because they don't quite know what to do with them. And the truth is, those Western people representing them or converting them also don't quite know what to do with those old traditions. The West clearly wants to be in charge of this realm, either by dictating that Christians leave African traditions alone and glorifying the original African traditions, or they recommend that the traditions be thrown out entirely, forgotten and burned, in the same way I've heard of other African villages across the continent that came to accept Jesus, and the whole village got together and burned everything in the village square. Faith and how it is lived out from generation to generation is not static. So when John Wesley rode the circuit during the Great Awakening, preaching from town to town, the stories of faith and radical change were very different to the stories that we find today of those coming to faith in the West. Redefining the lived out part of faith is new every generation. Because it is the same doesn't mean it's authentic, and because it's different doesn't mean it's authentic either, nor does it mean that it's right and good and progressive and a betterment of the previous generation. What exists in Africa today is a bit of a window into our own past, like as in the Great Awakening. Not so many generations ago, my grandmother was also practicing her animistic traditions. Yet the holiness movement had its effect on those rituals. My parents won't even talk about what my grandparents did. In contrast, currently, I don't see that Africa has that white-hot spiritual fervor that Francis Asbury was known for from the Great Awakening. During the Great Awakening, he had a drive to reach every section of America, especially the raw frontier. Africa, even Uganda, has a raw frontier, but absent is the fervor for evangelical message in every corner. Asbury said, "We must not be afraid of men, devils, wild animals, or disease. Our motto must always be forward." I don't know of anyone like that. I don't know of anyone with that kind of legacy. The missionaries to Uganda have ample budgets, insurance of every kind, but the biggest thing that is missing is the passion for the Lord that leads a lasting impact. Many are worldviews away from the existing one in Uganda. Most Ugandans have very living and active presence in the animistic traditions, which psychologically control them and also control their physical and spiritual well-being. Many fear and encounter daily attacks from their relatives and friends and colleagues who are close to them. Imagine always fearing the ones near you because their evil intentions cause them to stir up a potion to harm you. Imagine going to a potluck and fearing to be poisoned. Many people die early of poisoning, intentional poisoning. Spirits control this land or that land, and so certain people want the land and connive with the spirits by sacrificing and performing other rituals. Yes, I said sacrificing. That means actual sacrificing of a human. World Vision has an article about this. 5 things you need to know about child sacrifice in Uganda. Yes, child sacrifice. It's actually, literally happening, and we emphasize these points simply because it is so foreign to the Western mind. 2, they are trying to stop ritual child sacrifice. 3, the rituals stem from a belief in witchcraft. These are all integrated. In a secular article by AA.com, it is reported that there's a spike in human sacrifice incidents, and it worries authorities in Uganda. Despite enacting tough laws and threatening death sentences, people still engage in human sacrifices. And according to officials, they have recorded 132 incidents of human sacrifice in the last 3 years. More worrying is that those numbers have spiked. In addition to that, a number of these incidents are not reported. Reporting is not a high priority in Uganda, and we know it. I purport that these realities completely change how one lives out their spiritual life in Uganda. Missionaries from the West either come and adjust to the reality or not. Those who marry into the traditions enter a whole new level of adjustment. So stay tuned for the next edition of the Singyendos in Uganda.